Well, I have no idea why it played the actual podcast intro there, but hey, that's fine. That'll work. What's going on, everybody? For anybody who doesn't know me, my name is John. I am the creator and co-host of Super Deformed Gamescast, which you can see live every Thursday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And for anybody who normally listens to our podcasts, as you know, we normally talk about video games. Everything to do with them. We love them. But every 2 weeks, I, as somebody who suffers from generalized anxiety disorder, GAD, you'll hear me refer to, I do this. It's called the support class, and I just sit around and I talk about how I've been managing my anxiety over the past couple weeks, or we'll talk about ways to deal with the various forms of mental illness that are out there. Of course, I am a TakeThis.org volunteer. I am a TakeThis.org streaming ambassador, as you can see by our little icon there down in the corner. And I am an advocate for talking openly and honestly about my mental illness, because just as there's nothing wrong with me, so too is there nothing wrong with you. You are just fine. And so what we're going to do today is talk a little bit. I thought we would talk just a little bit about how to manage our anxiety during the holidays. Now, I want to make sure, I see that there's some people in chat. I want to make absolutely certain that I can see everybody. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask me. I'm happy to answer them. And I've got the chat up now, so I can see any questions that might be thrown my way. For anybody who may listen to or watch this, just to reiterate, like I do at the beginning of every one of these, I just want to point out, I am not a mental health professional. I am not a licensed clinician. So anything that I say here, unless I actually have a clinician on, please do not take anything I say as medical advice. If you are feeling anything from, like something like suicidal, for example, please, by all means, go to the emergency room, call a doctor, dial 911. This is a podcast where I, as somebody who suffers from mental illness, am just here to give you my opinions on it and maybe help us all understand it a little better. So like I said, what I wanted to talk about tonight was managing anxiety over the holidays. And if you're anything like me, then your anxiety manifests in a huge way whenever a major holiday starts. Specifically, when you start talking about holidays like Thanksgiving and Christmas, when there's a lot of family interaction, individuals who you love but may not quite understand your anxiety or quite know how to deal with it when you start feeling anxious. And this can manifest over the holidays in quite a few ways. Sorry, as always, I need my liquid courage here when I start talking publicly about my mental illness. So, in order to understand where I'm coming from when I talk about anxiety and mental illness over the holidays, first you need to understand a little bit about me. So, I'm 37 years old. I've dealt with crippling anxiety my entire life. As I said, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a doctor. I never even finished college. I was a Marine. I was a U.S. Marine. I have no formal training in this sort of thing at all. I'm loud. I'm backslapping. I'm pretty physically strong, and I may even come off as a little bit arrogant sometimes. Endearingly so, but arrogant. I prefer boastful. But the thing about all that is that it's all fake. It's all phony. It's just smoke and mirrors. A way to hide who I really am. And the reality is I'm just a regular guy, and who has lived in almost paralyzing fear my entire life. And that's tough for me to admit. Once upon a time, I was a U.S. Marine who greatly valued strength. I saw multiple combat tours in 2 different theaters of war, across 7 deployments. In 2004, I fought in the Battle of Fallujah, the second Battle of Fallujah, which was the worst of the entire war. It didn't get any worse than that throughout Operation Iraqi Freedom. And I saw I did things there I can't even begin to describe and will probably never fully reconcile with. But the fear that you experience in combat, for me, is really nothing compared to fear in the unknown, which is exactly where the core of my anxiety kind of emanates from. If you see me doing this weird shit with my eyes, I apologize. In fact, you know what? I'm going to drop an eye drop in there because for anybody who may not know, I suffer from blepharitis, which is chronic dry eye. It's nothing that makes you go blind. It's nothing that's going to hurt your eyes. But what it does do is it makes things really difficult sometimes. Well, really uncomfortable anyway. So now it looks like I've been weeping. Um, anyway, ooh, that's a little better. But anyway, where was I? Oh yeah, right. The core of my anxiety. I'll put it blunt, right? I'll be as upfront with you as I can be. If you give me a weapon right now and told me to fight, I wouldn't hesitate. Live or die. I know that there's only two possible outcomes to that, and I'm okay with that. I have a defined enemy. I know what I'm aiming at. But the scenarios conjured by my own anxious mind have left me reduced to tears in many cases where combat has not. And the truth is my anxiety, my depression scares me much more than combat ever did. I'm gonna make sure I got it. I am keeping an eye on the chat here. So for anybody who doesn't know, anxiety is like a hydra, right? That's how I like to describe it. It has multiple heads, each operating independently of the other. What do I mean by that? What I mean is have you ever had two different anxiety triggers kind of fighting for dominance at the same time? Sometimes here's an example, right? So sometimes I'll be out with a group and my social anxiety is just kind of whipping up, doing its thing. When somebody brings up a relative or an individual they know who is very ill, very sick. And just like that, I can't snap tonight. There we go. That's better. Want a good sounded snap. Right then, I can't even help it. I can't stop it from happening. It just pops into my head. I immediately imagine myself with whatever illness that is, right? I start thinking to myself, well, what if, this person's cousin has, lymphoma or leukemia? What if at this point next year, I suddenly have leukemia? What's that going to be like for me? And then my health anxiety and my social anxiety mindsets start kind of fighting for dominance to figure out which one is going to scare me the most. Eventually one loses, but if anybody is familiar with the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, when you talk about Hydra, you know that cut off one head, two more take its place. So I never really win. It just keeps happening. And of course, different heads will attack during different scenarios. But if you're anything like me, excuse me, it seems like every single head gets their absolute fiercest for the holidays, especially holidays involving large groups of people, like Thanksgiving or Christmas. Christmas is a big one for me, but it's kind of all-encompassing for in that regard. So I don't know about you, but I kind of hate and love this time of year equally, simultaneously. Obviously I love spending time with my wife and son, but if the group gets any larger than that, and I mean like just one or two people larger than that, I tend to kind of retreat into myself. I become very brusque. I become very antisocial. I don't want to be around anybody, at least not for long stretches of time. And it doesn't matter that I really love, like my wife's family, for example. I really love being around them. But that doesn't matter, right? Like that's just how my brain is wired. That's just how things happen in my mind. And it's really bad when I'm arriving there. And this is weird, right? Like it's really bad when I'm arriving there after everybody else does, as I kind of want to do. Because most of the time when I go, when my wife and I go visit my in-laws for the holidays, I'm usually driving straight from work, and she's got my son, and I meet them there several hours afterwards, usually later in the evening. And when I'm arriving at whatever family function that is, and it's just me and I walk in, all of a sudden everybody's already gathered. I walk in the house and every single set of eyes is suddenly focused on me, greeting me, hugging me, shaking my hand, touching me, noticing me, getting up close to me. And look, they love me. They do. And I'm lucky enough to where my in-laws actually understand my anxiety and they're able to recognize this, the warning signs. They understand my triggers. They get it. But that doesn't matter for me. At that moment, my basest instinct, like the one thing I want to do more than anything else, is to just rip open a hole in time and space so I can jump into some pocket dimension where I'm just completely and utterly alone. Right? Like that, at that moment, that's the only thing that I feel will make me feel better. But the thing about all of that is that's never going to happen, right? I can't do that. Neither can you. And that's the thing. Like, does this scenario resonate with anybody? Um, because if it does, I mean, the unfortunate truth is that we can't simply just disappear into our own little world where we're completely and utterly alone. It's just not the way it works. Um, it's not fair, and it's not fair that we have to live with this. But then again, life isn't always fair, is it? It's not. Um, but there's no need for despair over this. I despaired over this for a long time, years and years and years. I thought to myself, well, why? I'm supposed to enjoy the holidays. I'm supposed to enjoy Christmas and Thanksgiving. These are supposed to be joyous occasions. Why am I not? Why can I not do that? Why can I not have a good time like everybody else here? But there is a silver lining to all this, right? Like, there's good news. The thing about anxiety, and I've said this before, and I'll say it again, it's part of us. We are not part of it. We own our anxiety. It does not own us. So you got to remember, anxiety is a state of mind. That's what this is. It's the state of your mind, to be exact. My mind. Now, can we control our anxiety? Not really. I mean, not anymore. Not anymore that we can control our own subconscious, which we can't. But we can do the next best thing. We can be its master, or at least we can pretend we're its master. We can act like its master. And you're probably asking yourself, John, what do you mean by that, right? Well, it's very simple. I have found that exerting quote unquote control over my anxiety, even if it's just me telling myself I'm doing it, is extremely empowering. Let's talk about what I mean by that. You are the majority shareholder of your own mind, period. Nobody will ever have more influence over you than you. When you feel your anxiety ramping up, now this is what I do, okay? I want to be clear. This is what I do. When I feel my anxiety. When I feel my anxiety ramping up, especially over the holidays, I don't fight it. I let it in with the very strict understanding that I am allowing it to run rampant for a little while. I am allowing it to do its work, to do its dirty work. It's very similar to me taking my dogs to the dog park and letting them run it out to calm them down or to kind of get the wiggles out. When I feel the tide rising in my ocean of anxiety, I tell it, I confront it, and I tell it, you've got, I don't know, 10 minutes. Let's just say 10 minutes. You've got 10 minutes of time to do your thing, be a bastard, make me afraid. I'm letting you in momentarily. That's key. I want to stress that. I'm letting you in. You have 10 minutes. Go wild. After that, I'm cutting you off. I'm shutting you out. You're going in timeout, and you're staying there until I say otherwise. It sounds cheesy, I know, but trust me on this one. I'm telling you right now, it really takes the edge off in a really, really good way, in a way I can't even describe. Because I think the reason this works for me, and the reason I think it might work for you if you try it, is that everybody likes to feel powerful, right? Like everybody wants to feel victorious. Everybody likes that feeling of winning. And nothing makes me personally feel as powerful as I do when I bring order to my most personal antagonist, which is myself. I consider myself to be my greatest foe most of the time, because I constantly feel like I am in conflict with my anxiety, which makes up a large. It's not, again, I want to stress, it's not the majority of who I am, but it is a large part of us. Our anxiety is a large part of who we are, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'd also really recommend, kind of, for lack of a better term, shining a light into the darkness. If you're comfortable, talk about your anxiety. That's what I've chosen to do. I do this every other week. I sit on here and sometimes I talk about topics like this. Sometimes I'm very focused. Sometimes I'll prepare something beforehand, and sometimes I just ramble. And it's not, like on SDGC Live, I like to say, it's not always poetry and we don't always agree, but we always keep it real. That's kind of similar to what I'm doing here. Like, it's not always beautiful. It's not always something that, it's not always Shakespeare or Tennyson, but it's always real. That's what I try to do. Um, so talk about it. Talking is some of the best medicine there is for generalized anxiety or depression or PTSD. You've got to air it out. You've got to open the drawers up, open the doors, open the windows, and air yourself out every once in a while. Um, Now, I would prefer that you talk about this with a licensed clinical mental health therapist. That's always going to be my recommendation to you first off. But if you don't have one or you're looking for one and all you have are some friends to talk to, then talk to them. Find somebody who understands you. Or journal, do something. Just get those thoughts out there. And really, like I'm lucky, right? I understand that in a lot of ways, I'm very lucky. I have an extended family that knows about and understands my anxiety and my triggers and what to say and what not to say and when to kind of leave me to my own devices. And it's not always a bed of roses. I won't lie to you, but a room full of people, even if you are in the throes of social anxiety, a room full of people who know and understand what's happening to you is really something. It helps in a way that is indescribable. And it makes me personally feel less drawn into myself when things start getting heavy. Now, of course, not everyone is going to have that sort of immediate familial support, because some people will just never understand, right? Like you can explain it to them till you're blue in the face, and they are never going to understand the depth of you or what your mental illness does to you, because there's always going to be those people, whether they be inside your family or without, who just want you to get over it, man, or just want you to man up, or just want you to deal with it, because they don't understand that it's not something you can control. When people hear the words anxiety, people who don't suffer from mental illness, people who don't suffer from anxiety, when they hear the word anxiety, they think, oh, like anxious is something I get when I'm waiting on a test score, or anxious is something I get when I ask a girl for her number and there's that 5-second pause between me asking her and her either turning me down or handing it off to me. That's anxiety, man. But that's really not what it is at all. They don't understand that. Hell, my wife's family, my in-laws, understand my anxiety better than my own blood relatives do. But even if your family doesn't quite and that's not to say my family doesn't love me. Of course they love me, but not all of them understand what my anxiety does to me. Or how it makes me feel. They don't understand my triggers. And there are some people you're just not going to be able to kind of bring on board to that, right? And that's fine. Because even then, you're still not alone. I have said this multiple times. I've said it on this little support class podcast. I have said it at PAX East, PAX West, when people come up to me and talk about anxiety, when I'm working the TakeThis.org booth. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I use it for every pitch I give to people who come to the Take This booth. You have an extended, if you suffer from mental illness, be it generalized anxiety, PTSD, depression, bipolar disorder, anything, you have an extended family of millions and millions, 40 million people to be exact, just in the United States alone. That's 40 million people. You go outside, you count 4 people. Every one of those 4 people suffers from or will suffer from some form of mental illness at some point in their life. You're never alone. You don't ever feel alone, especially not during the holidays, during Christmas, during Thanksgiving. Your other family, which is the rest of us, is bigger than you could possibly realize. And millions of us are always, always, always willing to listen. And not just willing to listen, but willing to learn about you, willing to learn about what makes you tick, willing to learn about your triggers and how best to help you. Anyone, I am confident about this, anyone who suffers from mental illness like you do will understand more than you realize, always. And I see that we just got some new people in the chat here. If anybody has any questions they want to ask, or if they want me to answer a question about anxiety, if they want to give a story of their own, please, by all means, I'm more than willing to listen. And I see that we do have some people in chat that I don't recognize. So welcome, guys. I appreciate you being here. And I did this, I've done this a couple times now, but hold on. Gotta get that medicine up in me. So we do have some new people in the chat right now. So what I'll do for you guys is I will give you, and I did this the first episode of Support Class, but I'll do it again because it's a story I enjoy telling. And we got a question in chat here. Okay, so I can't. What is this username? Mick Bisquick. I like that. What's up? Don't let this derail you, and you may have addressed it in episode 2, but you briefly mentioned the idea of guilt in episode 1, and I guess my big hang-up is trying not to be a burden to others. Is that something you've dealt with? Yes, absolutely. So I am constantly apologizing to my wife, Vicky, and she's a saint. But sometimes my anxiety gets me in a really shitty mood, and I'll lash out and say things that I don't mean. And it's nothing that she's done. It's nothing that anybody's done. It's just where my head is at in the moment. I will take jokes as being, personal slights and stuff like that. I deal with that constantly. And because you always feel like I, in a lot of ways, excuse me. Oh man, sorry guys, I got something stuck in my throat there. In a lot of ways, I feel like anybody who has to deal with my personal form of mental illness, which is just my crippling fucking anxiety, I almost feel like they have to be a caregiver to me, because there have been a few days, especially over the last few months when things have gotten really bad, where I just feel like I can't fucking do anything. We were supposed to go to dinner across the street with some friends. We have some really close friends who live right across the street. This was about maybe a month ago. And I was having some really, really dark thoughts that day. Because I get a lot of physical symptoms of anxiety, like IBS, or, the shakes or twitches or lightheadedness or fucking heart palpitations. I mean, you name it, I get it, and I know that these things are anxiety related, like deep down in my heart of hearts, I know that, but there's a disconnect between rational John and irrational John, or as they call it in the clinical field, the reptilian brain, the subconscious. There's a disconnect there, and there's always that voice whispering in my ear, well, what if it's not anxiety this time, John? What if it's not? And I become practically fucking comatose sometimes. I don't want to do anything. I curl up into a ball in bed, like I did this one night. We were supposed to go just across the street, and Vicky came upstairs to see if I was ready to go, and I was just curled up in bed, just saying things like, I don't want to live anymore. Now, of course, I'm still here. I didn't hurt myself. I would never do that. I would never harm myself, especially after, if you know anything about my experiences with suicide, my best friend, I would never do that. But everybody who has anxiety, everybody who suffers from mental illness has dark thoughts sometimes. That's normal. That there's nothing wrong with you. That's completely normal to feel that way. And she almost called my therapist to try to get him to talk to me. And eventually I was able to pull myself up and work myself out of it, but she had to dedicate an extra 30 minutes just to try to get me moving. And then after about an hour, I think about, man, like, why did you do that, John? Like that was fucked up. Like that was, so why are you such a burden on everybody? I start thinking about the needless worry that I put her through, or the needless worry that I put anybody through whenever I start lashing out or whenever my anxiety ranks up. So yes, absolutely. That is 110% something I deal with. And if it's something you deal with, I got news for you, man. Like there's nothing wrong with you. That's normal. Yeah, dude, no problem, man. Like that's what I'm here for. I'm just here to answer questions and talk. So please, if anybody else has another question, feel free to ask. I am more than happy to answer them. Yeah, it's just things get really tough this time of year, for anybody with anxiety. And it almost makes you feel, I don't know, it almost makes you feel like you don't want to celebrate, which sucks, because that's what the holidays are for. But it makes you feel weak, it makes you feel lethargic. It makes you feel like you don't want to go anywhere. I mean, there are times that I just don't want to leave the house. Like I've been wearing this fucking hoodie around the house for all weekend since Friday, simply because I'm not motivated to do anything with myself. It's been a rough weekend for me, from an anxiety standpoint. But if anybody has any questions, we've got a few more minutes. If anybody's got any more questions or any comments they want to throw out in chat, please, by all means, throw them out there. This is still something that I'm kind of growing. This is only episode 3, so this is something that I'm trying to mold. I am more than willing to take advice from anybody. If there's some kind of a segment you would like me to do here, or maybe a topic you would like me to address, if it has to do with anxiety, I've been living with this for 38 years now. Jesus Christ, and you say that, 38 years. I've probably dealt with it So if anybody has any questions, please throw them at me. And of course, you don't have to ask them here either. You could always just hit me up on Twitter. If you don't have my Twitter handle, it's at Mr. Megative, MisterMegative. Actually, a lot of people ask me, John, where did that Twitter handle come from? Because it's clever, and it seems like it's as good a place as ever to tell the story. Unfortunately, it's not as exciting or as clever as you may think it is. So at work one day, this was about maybe 3 years ago. Somebody sent me a work, or somebody sent me a work at email. Jesus, somebody sent me an email at work, and I had a nickname there. Called Mr. Negative because I'm super anxious and depressed all the time, especially at work, and everybody's always like, oh John, why are you being Mr. Negative, man? Well, somebody sent me an email as a response to something I had sent out, and they meant to call me Mr. Negative, but if you look down at your keyboard, you will see that the N and the M are right next to each other. So what they did was they hit the M instead of the N and typed out Mr. Negative, and I saw this in the email. And I thought that was just the funniest thing I'd ever seen. One, because it actually does come off as a clever play on words. And two, because one of my favorite game franchises of all time is Mega Man. So I thought to myself, you know what? I've been wanting to get on Twitter anyway. And so what better handle to have than Mr. Megative? So I went ahead and I snapped that up. That's kind of the story as to how that Twitter handle came about. So I guess if nobody has any more questions, we will go ahead and sign off here. Now, I have been doing this bi-weekly, but I don't know. Like, would it help people? Like, you tell me. Like, do you guys get anything out of me doing this? Does this help at all? I hope it does. I like to think maybe it does, because if it does, it's something I could look at doing every Sunday. Maybe have some of you on if you're listening to this and you've got a story you want to tell. Or if you just want to come on here and unburden yourself, I'm more than willing to bring you on so you can talk about it. I'll leave you guys with this. If there's no questions coming forth in chat, I'll leave you guys with this. It's okay to be okay. There's nothing wrong with you. There's a stigma, not just in the gaming community, but in society in general, about mental illness. You say mental illness in the movies and literature and games, books, music, and people think crazy, people think psychopath, people think evil, but that's not the case at all. There's nothing wrong with you at all. Don't ever be ashamed of who you are. Do not forget that this podcast here is a safe place for you. I will never judge you. I will never laugh at you. There's nothing wrong with you at all. We are all in this together. And we always will be. So please don't forget that. If you take nothing else away from anything that I'm talking about here, please don't forget that. And like I've said during this episode, obviously the holidays can be a very stressful time for people. If you need to talk, please feel free to hit me up on Twitter, send me a message. I will talk to you. I will drop whatever I'm doing, as long as it's not like life or death or anything. If I'm involved in something like serious, then obviously I can't be there. But if you need to talk, I am more than happy to talk to you. All you have to do is reach out to me, and I promise you, I will make the time. I will never deny you that, ever, because I know what it's like to feel like you're alone and needing somebody right there in that moment. I have been there. I have been there when you were feeling alone, and you feel like there's nobody there to guide you. There's nobody there to talk to you. There's nobody there who understands you. And if I don't understand, then help me understand. But I will talk to you if you need me to. I cannot stress that enough. So anyway, we'll go ahead and we'll cut it off here. Hey, dude, no, not a problem. See, that's perfect. Even if I'm just helping one person, Mick Bisquick in chat. Even if I'm just helping one person with this, that's more. That's all I need. That's more than enough. And I appreciate your time. I appreciate you being here on a Sunday night. And if nobody has anything else, then we will go ahead and we'll cut this off. And again, reach out to me on Twitter if you need me. Thanks for hanging out with me on a Sunday. Take care of yourselves, okay?